Welcome into Emerald and Lilywhite. This is episode 40, and we are the official YouTube channel of Seattle Spurs. Rocking just the two of us today, myself and Max. I'm your host, Scott. You can find me at Scotchy Bird on all social media platforms. And with me, you know him by now, the co-host of the show, Max at Going Limbs. Max, what's up, man?
Not much, this is Seattle Spurs, so I got the Sounders Champions League game on the phone, but got to get a record in for the big game on Thursday. And yeah, just me and Scott, so we're going to OG
That's
for
dedication, bro.
tonight's pod. Yeah.
That's dedication. We got to get this.
I know Yeah, I know Chang would be pressing me if I wasn't watching the Sounders game. So there you go, Chang. That's your proof.
Get it out of the way. Yeah, we're recording this Tuesday evening. We want to make sure that we have time to get this out and let the folks listen on Wednesday before the big match on Thursday morning/afternoon. Chang.
It's at 1 p.m. actually.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
Oh, I guess here. Yeah, Pacific.
Yeah, still pretty late in the day or whatever. So
yeah,
if any of you stragglers need to get your listen on Thursday morning, you're gonna have time to do that. But yeah, it's a big one. Chang, respect the fact for sure that Max has a Sounders game on. I'm a Dynamo fan. Nothing good to say about the Houston Dynamo this far in the season. Actually, quite parallel to Spurs. Have a ton of the ball and do absolutely nothing with it. So, fun times for me as a Dynamo supporter. But yeah, best of luck to the Sounders. I always have a soft spot for the Seattle Sounders. And anytime they're not playing Houston, they have my full support. So, roll Sounders for sure. But let's talk Spurs. Obviously, we are the official YouTube channel of Seattle Spurs. A lot to talk about, actually. We're going to freestyle it a little bit, as has been the case as of late. Games are coming in pretty thick and fast, and they're important. Spurs rescue a point against Bournemouth, and I say that pretty boldly. Rescue a point against Bournemouth in a match that we both probably feel was a little bit of an underwhelming performance. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and then, we'll make sure that we cover Alkmaar and the big one on Thursday too, which is probably – where the whole season hinges, if we're being honest, is Thursday's match. But again, let's talk Bournemouth for a second. Spurs rescue a point, fall 2-0 after some pretty poor play. A Pop Sar goal that I will never, ever, ever say was a shot, no matter how many of you out there want to tell me that he shot that ball. I will never agree. It was a really poor cross to Solanke.
Absolutely terrible cross. It was honestly shocking. I wanted him. I texted in the group chat. I was like, what a cross. Sub him off right now. Please get him off the field. That was so shit.
Sar was so surprised when that ball went in. He didn't even know how to react.
I know. And then I'm listening. Plug Tottenham Depot, Scott's other podcast. I'm at work. I'm like, all right, like we haven't recorded yet. Let me give them a listen after the game. And they're all like, what a goal by Sar. I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? It is not a goal. And then Scott's like, yeah, it was honestly a shit cross. They're all attacking Scott.
Dude,
Scott, I got your back, bro. There's absolutely no way. You don't hit it with an out-swinging technique if you're trying to catch the goalkeeper out. No, that's just not how it works.
Never in a million years was that a shot. Listen, Andrew, Todd, Caroline, I love all three of you, but you're wrong. And it's nice that Max has my back. I'm going to make sure you listen to this episode too, you three, because
Emerald and Lilywhite taking the #1 spot in Scott's favorite pod rankings now.
Yeah, anyone who wants to agree with me that was a poor cross, you have my full support. So, but yeah, really poor cross from Sar, ends up in the back of the net, and then Sonny does take a questionable penalty that ended up being pretty smooth and sexy when it was all said and done. Scared me when he first put his foot on that ball.
That's bold. I don't know what he saw, because from the replay it didn't look like Kepa moved too early, to me at least. I agree. It's a bit risky, but
found its way in the back of the net. And as is the case when anything good happens for Spurs, Madison plays the ball into Son, and Son does well to earn that penalty. So
Son build up a little back heel flick. I don't know if that was suspense, who found Madison and then just made a great run. And that's kind of what I was alluding to on the last podcast. It's those two guys, they came on for us and they changed the game and rescued a point for us. So now let's see them do it from the jump on Thursday and kind of take the game by the scruff and really give us that dominating performance that we need against Alkmaar.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. I think, a big one in this match would have been the momentum that we needed to start building before Thursday. Obviously, last Thursday's performance was just abysmal. One of the worst performances we've seen under Ange Postecoglou, in my opinion. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a trend of these matches where we put anywhere from 0 to 2 shots on target throughout an entire match, and Thursday was one of them. But it was a really poor performance, and so we needed to find some sort of momentum to carry out of Sunday into this coming Thursday. I think the first half, absolutely nothing positive at all to take away from the first half. But again, coming back from down 2 goals isn't a horrible thing. Now, I'm certainly never going to subscribe to rescuing a point at home being a good thing, no matter who we're playing, right? Even against Liverpool, I expect us to perform and put up a fight in a home match at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and that's just a poor performance in my opinion, regardless of the fact that we rescued a point. Let's talk about the lineup. I think it had people raging, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
Vicario and net, Porro, Romero, Danzo, and Spence across the back line. Worth pausing for a second and saying the return of Christian Romero didn't go as planned, but we did see the return of Christian Romero, and we're going to talk about that. A midfield of Basuma, Bentancur, and Sarr, highly questionable to say the least, in my opinion. I just don't necessarily, we're going to talk about that. I'll leave it at that. But a questionable midfield. And then up top, Odegaard and Johnson flank Solanke. Super nice to see Dom in the lineup after the injury scare, you could say, last Thursday. Good for Odegaard to get some minutes, and it's clear that Johnson is Ange's guy and is going to play, when he's available. So anyways, when you look at that lineup, probably a few things we want to poke holes in, but what stands out to you right away?
I don't know, like daylight savings in the U.S. and Ange just putting out a team on Sunday morning that has a midfield of Basuma, Bentancur, and Sarr. At this point, it just feels like cruel and unusual a little bit. I mean, this squad is just completely devoid of creativity from the starting 11. And we saw that pan out. Like, I feel like any of us could have told you how this was going to go. Like when we saw the lineup, and then we only start creating chances after we get like Bergvall, Madison, and Son on.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I feel like we all understand it. But I mean, you got to rotate, I guess. It's a bit confusing. Like Bentancur was always going to play. I think Sarr was always going to play, but you probably could have done Madison or Bergvall. But that's really speaking to the rotation that he wants to save for Thursday. I don't know what he's going to do at the 6 for Thursday, because it's assumed that like Basuma is 6, although I think we both have some other opinions on that. And then, yeah, the front 3, Odegaard, Johnson, just extremely disappointing. I think Johnson came off at halftime for Sonny.
He did, yeah.
Yeah. And then, and then Christian Romero was fucking horrible. So, shout out to him. Out for 27 months, sneak dissing Spurs on Instagram while being absolute shit. Thanks, Christian Romero, for all you're giving to our club.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Romero put out a post, which of the first half was very standard. We didn't play that well. We'll come back stronger. Clearly written by, or I thought to be clearly written by, some sort of PR person. And then you see the second half of the post, and you're like, never mind, the PR person definitely did not write this post, because he comes out to thank the Argentine physios for
shout out Argentina.
Yeah, exactly. He shouts out the Argentinian Football Association.
Can't wait to be back. 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. So it was definitely a dig at Spurs. I think anyone with a pulse is starting to suspect that Romero's probably off this summer. I don't think I'll catch much argument when I say that, but yeah, not a good performance. And I don't think we can expect the Rolls Royce version of Romero after coming off such a long layoff. But you just expect a little bit more poise from
he's
someone
been
who
training for a minute now, I feel like.
yeah, and then anyone who's been instrumental in a World Cup victory, you just probably expect a little bit more poise from. Now, some of it I think is jumping the gun a little bit when I say this, because I do want to talk about Ange in the bigger picture, Ange in, Ange out, and all of that. I think it's an unavoidable conversation at this point, but sometimes I wonder if we're just too, I hate to use the word stubborn, but stubborn in terms of playing out the back. We cost ourselves, I think, too frequently trying to play out of the back, especially when you're changing lineups as much as we have been lately. I think Ange has some options now and is maybe tinkering and trying to get people minutes. And there's just been a lot of changes, and I think that can lead to some troubles playing out the back. So partly on Romeo, probably maybe on the tactics and a bigger picture conversation. And then the midfield, like you said, I don't trust Bentancur or Bissouma, yet alone both of them on the pitch at the same time. I assume in this trio, you're looking to play some sort of double pivot. I don't think there was enough of a cohesive performance to even see what was trying to happen or what the plan was tactically.
Triple
Right?
pivot.
But yeah, it really was. And I think, like, obviously for me and for you, we probably look at this and say, okay, we would expect that we're looking to push the ball wide when we're progressing it and not play through the middle with this type of midfield, right? I think you have Sarr, who will make penetrating runs. I think he actually makes pretty good runs into the final third. And so maybe that's an option to maybe bypass some of the creativity. And maybe our plan was to hit Bournemouth with those direct balls to Sarr, to Odegaard, to Brennan Johnson, for sure, being someone who is a good candidate for that type of play, right? But I don't expect our plan was to try to progress the ball creatively through the middle with this midfield. And I think Ange, honestly, in the first half said, I got these tactics super wrong against Bournemouth today, and brings Bergvall on and brings Sonny on and looks to more of that typical ball progression that we look to see under Spurs and Ange. So I don't know, but the midfield was definitely one that tells me that the tactics were very specific and different to what we tend to see.
Yeah. Definitely a lot more pragmatic. It's just not what you want. Like, people can say that he doesn't really have a choice, or like we do have Europe that we all can agree that we're focusing on, but
yeah,
I don't know, man. It's just shit football, like week in and week out, and it feels like we're just kind of relying on moments of maybe like individual brilliance rather than a system to eke out our goals, and that's not sustainable at all. And I honestly feel like Ange Ball, like, this might be a large proclamation, but it's completely dead. Like, this is not even remotely similar to what we saw, like, however many months ago that was, 18 months ago at the beginning of fall of 2023. Like, the Ange Ball is dead. I don't know what it is, but we're not pressing, we're not building out through the middle, we're not beating players. The inverted fullbacks have become much less of a focus, and it's been more like out of position fullbacks, which I don't really remember that much from the beginning. And I don't know, it's just defeating to watch this every game. And we kind of just got to stick with it. As long as we're still in the Europa League, there's still hope. But it's just like every game, what Madison said, dude, the quote of the season, every game we play the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of just up to like Madison, Son, Solanke, Kulusevski, one of those guys to like just make something happen. And then that includes like Romero, Porro at times with just a brilliant cross. It's never like the fluid build up attacking play that we remember. And I think a key part of that is pressing. Like, we don't press anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching highlights from last season. They posted like Villa highlights when we beat them 4-0. 2 of our goals were from winning the ball from their 6 or their fullback and just going.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when is the last time that happened? I can't recall that. Like, what happened to that? Is it the amount of games fatigue, injuries, etc. I don't know. But it's just not working at the moment. And I just feel like it's just never a good sign when like the longer a manager stays with the players, the worse they start performing. It's like, hasn't a single player improved since being under Ange? I don't know. I feel like they've all been at their best prior to now.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I can't think of anyone that's playing better than they were when Ange got here. Maybe Kulusevski actually, but
Yeah, because he was like kind of and then like he had the purple patch and then too many minutes, etc., and came back down to earth a little bit.
Well, and low key, I think Kulu is the only person who Ange has kind of given just a free license to in this system, right? I think the system's very specific. I've talked about this before. I talked about it on the other show that Max mentioned earlier. This is probably very much same thing I said in the other show, grumpy man yelling at the clouds type of take, right? But I just think that in the current game, there's way too much emphasis on like a perfected machine style system, right? And I've just always been somebody who believes that soccer is all about just feeling the vibe and feeling the flow around you and just going out and playing the beautiful game. It's like Bob Marley's famous quote, when football is part of I, when I play, the world wakes up around me. And I don't think like in the modern game, you see enough of that, right? Of that mentality. And it's management. That's why Fabio Capello came out this week and said Pep Guardiola has absolutely ruined football. And this is a very interesting interview for anyone who wants to know more. Just Google Fabio Capello, Pep Guardiola, and it's going to be the first thing that pops up. And Fabio Capello is a legend of the game for anyone who maybe doesn't know, right? Has managed England, has managed Juventus, has managed Real Madrid. He managed the true real Ronaldo, right, at Real Madrid, and just a legend, and came out and said, I have the utmost respect for Pep, and he's obviously a phenom and is just uber talented, but I low-key think he has ruined. He didn't say low-key because he's like certainly not of that generation, right? But came out and said, I think Pep Guardiola's ruined the sport of football. And some of that is kind of what I'm getting at. So back to Kulu, I think he's the one person who hasn't been like suckered into that perfectionist system style of football on our team. And maybe that plays into it too. Speaking of Kulu, we absolutely cannot progress the ball without him. And is that a poor take, or is it just Kulu or bust for us at this point?
I mean, yeah, I think we kind of did become dependent on definitely his like ball carrying ability. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, like I just feel like it's the lack of like a good six, like that is just making it so hard for us. Like Kulu, when he's progressing it, like he's picking it up deep. Like we're supposed to have the six and like the inverted fullbacks theoretically to kind of maneuver the ball upfield, maybe get it wide and then get it into the 10, and then Madison can like create. But the fact that like Bentancur and Basuma, when they try to make those passes, it usually ends up in a chance for the other team. So then Kulu is like, fuck it, like I'll just do this myself. It's just really hindering us. I think it comes down to the 6th position. And then Madison, like he doesn't have the legs or the strength to like pick it up deep in our own half and like kind of work it his way up the field, holding off some defenders. That's not the type of player he is. He's the type of player that wants to create chances in the final third, not really play like a box to box, like 8 type of role like Kulusevski does when he's in that spot. And that's definitely hurting us as well. Like you would hope Sarr could be somewhat of that figure, but I think he's another player. Like I like how you said like machine when it comes to like modern managers, because like we got robots out there, dude, like Johnson, Sarr, Bentancur. Like it just looks like these guys have all been coached into oblivion, not even a shell of the players that I thought they were or that they were. When it comes to Bentancur, Johnson, I thought was a completely different player. If you watch his older highlights, he's beating his man. I don't think he's ever beat his man for Tottenham unless it's just a touch straight in front of him. And then Sarr, like, maybe I was off base. I thought he was like a creative, like 8, like a Yaya Toure type when he first burst on the scene under Ange, and now it seems like he's just a pass it sideways, like hardworking merchant for us at this point.
Yeah, he's like a metronome, but I don't think he's good enough to do that. When I say that, I think like that's kind of what he's supposed to do, but I don't think he's. I mean, when I say metronome, I think of like Luka Modric or Andrea Pirlo, and that's about it. And I do not put Sarr in the same category as him. No offense to Pop
Really?
Sarr.
Oh.
But I do think that he has that in his game. I just don't think it's the way that, and I don't mean the metronome. I think what you're talking about, like that creative 8, I think he has that in his game, but I don't think it's what he's asked to do. Let's save the Ange, this more deep dive into Ange and his tactics and what it all means for the bigger picture for the end of the show. If you're listening and you're with us, stick around, because that's probably the meat that most people want to chew on right now, is wondering what's going on with Ange Postecoglou. But before we do, I do want to talk about what's coming on Thursday for just a moment. Obviously, massive match. The entire season hinges on what happens Thursday. In my opinion, it's way too early in the Europa League campaign to be in a situation where we're playing this massive of a match, right? But here we are. First question: what is your general temperature? What are you feeling like is going to happen on Thursday?
Yeah, I said it last podcast. Like, I do think we go through. The manner in which we go through, I don't know. I can see us like kind of running riot a little bit at home and just having like a huge like morale boost. People are back on the Ange train, but maybe that's just like the optimist, like the shred of hope in me that is going to happen, but it's probably more likely we see something like we saw over the weekend, where maybe like a set piece and kind of like maybe a mistake at the back from Alkmaar we capitalize on, and it's like a 2-0 scrape through, which would not make, I don't think, any of us feel better. The lineup is going to be really interesting. What are you thinking? Like we for those that haven't seen, Danso is going to be out until after the international break. I think just picked up a knock over the weekend. Nothing too concerning, but we got 2 games this week and then a couple of weeks off. So he'll be back after that. So it kind of just leaves us with the boys back at center back. But I'm curious what you think. The rest of the lineup is definitely going to be some points of contention there. We got players back. We got a lot of decisions to make.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I do agree with you that Romero and Van de Ven will be the center back pairing. I don't see how you can go any other direction in such a massive match right now. And there is an argument that maybe Archie Gray and Mickey Van de Ven could be an option, but I don't think you can go without Mickey Van de Ven in this match if he's prepared to give it a go. Makes me nervous, but I think he'll start, and then I just think Romero starts next to him after getting the start last weekend. I think Udogie starts at left back. He didn't play much at all against Bournemouth, just like 10 minutes if I'm not mistaken, and so I'm sure that was designed, and I'm sure Udogie starts at left back. I really hope Jed Spence starts at right back. I wouldn't be surprised if Porro gets a start, and I would not like that. But if he does, I would only assume that Ange feels that could be an opportunity for us to kind of nick a goal at some point, right? Is a paper pour a ball into the final third or a set piece. So yeah, I'm going to say Porro starts, as much as it pains me to say that. I think in the midfield, I do believe it will be Bentancur. I don't think Basuma can be anywhere near the pitch after his first half performance, which saw him.
Bentancur is suspended.
Oh shit, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, then I'm putting it in the universe. Archie Gray.
Please. I don't give a fuck about development, whatever the reasoning behind this is. We need him at the 6.
Yeah, I agree. I think it can't be Basuma is the main reason I say that.
No, it cannot be Basuma.
And I'm not even trying to pick on an individual person, but Yeah, Basuma just can't play in this match. I'll leave it at that. So yeah, Archie Gray would be fantastic. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being some sort of Saar, Bergvall, and Madison, right? I could see that happening. But I would really like to see Archie Gray, Lucas Bergvall, and James Madison
that's a dream midfield.
Yeah. And then up top, obviously, Solanke has to start. I'm putting Son on the left flank, and on the right side, I'm going Matthias Tell. That's my pick for the right side. And I say that because I think, first of all, we need 2 goals in this match at least, and I think he's going to be willing to take balls to goal more so than anyone else. I don't. There's this idea that he can take on his man. We haven't really seen that much. I can't pretend to watch a ton of Bayern.
Because our fucking manager is asking him to play a hold-up striker. Like
he's Todd. My buddy Todd talked a lot about this on the other pod that you mentioned, and I agree with Todd. I think Matthias Tell is not at 19 years old the physical profile required to play a 9 in the Premier League. But I do think with his pace, his quickness, and his ability to cut and shoot, I think you just need someone who can find the back of the net on the pitch in this match because we need to score at least 2 goals. So I think Son and Tell can offer a similar threat on each side of the pitch, right? And let Solanke do what he does best, which is hold up play and, distribute to both fullbacks and wingers. So yeah, to recap, I'm going Vicario. I'm going to backline of Porro, Van de Ven, Romero, and Udogie. I'm going to midfield of Archie Gray, Lucas Bergvall, James Madison, the front 3 of Son, Solanke, and Matthias Tell.
Interesting. Yeah. If I was the manager, I think I agree, goalkeeper, center backs, 100%. The fullback question is interesting. What I think will happen is I kind of agree. I think it's going to be Udogie and Porro, just based on like Spence's play the last couple games. Udogie rested. I would have done the Spence Porro combo probably in this match rather than at the weekend. Because you know why? Because it was so fucking obvious that Bournemouth were going to counterattack us and Porro was out of position. Not even Porro's fault. I'm not even going to blame Porro for this goal. I've given him so much shit this year, and I think deservedly so. But like, Porro is our most creative player on the field. He's fucking playing the number 10. His pass gets intercepted. To be fair, terrible pass. And then no one's there because he's playing the fucking 10. And we all know it's because Ange is asking him to be the main creator in the team, which is just unacceptable tactically. And we talked about how that changed in the second half. But I think like we need Porro in this game. Like we know what they're going to do. They're going to sit back. And our best chance to score when they're sitting back is genuinely from a Porro cross stomp Solanke header.
Agreed.
Or just Porro whipping it, just putting it in the mixer, handball, whatever it may be. Yeah. Like we need that ability there.
Or some sort of transition into the final third on like a quick transition where Porro finds Son on a run. Perfect. I think that could be the other way we find a goal.
But we do run the risk of being caught out counterattacking, extremely risky pick there, which is why you kind of want Spence. On the other side, just Udogie's another one of those players. Like he's just looks like he's just been coached way too hard, and now it just doesn't have like the creativity or even like the energy that he did last year before his injury. But I think it'll be Porro and Udogie. Furthermore, midfield, Archie Gray has to start. We went over that. Bergvall has to start. He's our best player alongside our other best player, James Madison. I think if we want to win this game, that's got to be the midfield. I don't fucking understand. Like, I don't understand if Ange doesn't play Gray at the 6. I just don't get it. Do you want to keep your job or not? That's just the simple question for Ange there. And then wingers, Son, Solanke, I think are bang on. And then for the right side, like if I was the coach, like, I think you know who I'm going with. I'm going with Mikey.
Yeah.
He destroyed the fullbacks last time he played against this team, and it's at home. He's well rested, if that's what people are concerned about. And I'm just tired of the excuses. Odebear was really poor, I thought, against Bournemouth, and I just haven't seen anything that makes me think that he's better than Mikey Moore.
Same.
I don't know if you agree with that. Like, I just genuinely, I think Mikey Moore is better than Wilson Odebear. That's nothing against Odebear. It's just like Mikey Moore's skill. Tell, I think, could be an interesting sub. I think he'll feature in the match. I mean, he just got some rest. Johnson, another poor game, but I could very well see him starting, and that's a guy who does for all of his shortcomings as a proper winger, he does put goals in the back of the net. So I could see Johnson. I'd say I'd rank him for that right wing spot. If I was ranking him personally, I'd go Moore, then Johnson, then Tell, then Odebear. I just think Odebear just needs a reset. He has not looked very good, and I was kind of worried about this because we put him on a pedestal, and that's what happens when players are out for so long. He had like 20 good minutes against Everton in October, and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, we have the next Messi. He's not that yet. He's still young, and we can't rely on him in these types of games. But I think that Mikey Moore is good enough, and we've seen him against this very team. So there's really, I just don't get it. I just don't think there's any excuse at this point to not play him.
I agree. I mean, I said it last episode. If you protect Rooney, if you protect Michael Owen, if you protect Lamine Yamal, if you protect Lionel Messi, things look a lot different than they do if you protect Jamal Musiala. You know, like these guys just need to play football, and I think Mikey Moore is one of those guys that just needs to play football, and we don't need to get in our own way and overthink these things, right? Just put him on the pitch. I agree with you. Now, I know I said I would start Tell. That's me, right? But if I had to put money on it, I'd say Johnson starts.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I just don't think Johnson. I think Johnson's a fantastic footballer, but I don't think he offers you much of anything against the low block. If there's not going to be any space to get behind the back line, I don't see the value. So I like Brandon Johnson. I'm a big fan, but I wouldn't start him in this match. I think we can all expect an astute defensive performance or a stout defensive performance from AZ Alkmaar, who come to Tottenham with everything they need to get through. So, you know, what we have, we hold is going to be their mentality, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's a big one. I think you and I both agree that the entire season rests on Thursday, and I think there's a school of thought that Ange's job rests on what happens Thursday. And I'm not saying if we lose, Ange is sacked Friday morning, but I think if we lose, then the succession plan takes force and starts being put in place, right? So I could see a world where we lose this match and Ange keeps his job till the end of the season. But I think what I'm saying is if we lose this match, I think the Ange experiment is probably burnt out. And I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, and I'm for it. Like I think at this point, if you've been following along with the podcast, like I think it's safe to say that I kind of was the most skeptical of Ange, or like harsh on Ange this season. And I've been in Ange support. Like, I don't want people to get me wrong. Like, I would love Ange to succeed at this football club. And I think I've made that pretty clear as well. But at this point, I just don't think it's going to work here. Like, he's just not the type of manager that we need. And he's had success in the past when clubs literally signed 20 new players for him. Like in one window. That's what happened in Japan, Australia. They Celtic even brought in a whole new fucking team exactly fitted to his preferences. And when you're at this level, you can't just bring in players like that unless you're Chelsea. But even if you do that, the players likely aren't going to be good enough to execute the system that well. Unless you're like a really top team like Bayern, City, etc., which we're not. We're still in the early phases of a larger project. And then just from a tactical standpoint, we've talked about it. It's like just simple, like play to your team's strengths and hide your team's weaknesses. And it just seems like we're repeatedly like exploiting our own weaknesses. Like Brennan Johnson against a low block. Oh, we can clearly, like, people think he sucks because he can't beat his man. We've known this. Pedro Porro defensively, you give him free reign, like he's going to be out of position. We've known the defensive questions, and then the lack of like a 6 and how much a 6 is important to the system. And then putting Son out wide, we've talked about, and some of the building out that we just mentioned. Again, with no 6, it becomes really tough. And I think with Romero out, like, we can see how that was literally our build out play was a Romero carry job. All those passes, like you mentioned, Kulusevski progressing the ball, Romero would skip it right in there, almost to the final third and break us away just several times a game. We took it completely for granted. And I just feel like Ange just isn't fitting a system that benefits a lot of our players. And I don't think these are bad players. Like, I'd love to see Johnson, Porro, Son continue to succeed here. And I think they would succeed in a different system with a manager that's maybe more adaptable and is willing to kind of fit the system to the needs of the squad, which is, I think, what Poch did. And he was still able to play progressive footy. You don't have to destroy your philosophy. You just have to adjust it to what you have. And I feel like Ange, maybe this is where it's a little bit stubborn from him. And maybe he's a little bit like a needier manager, let's say, but I just feel like this isn't the club for that. And I want to reiterate the point that just because we have all these young players does not mean they're tied to the Ange Postecoglou project. This is the Tottenham project. Like, these players are Tottenham players. And if we get a manager with like similar-ish philosophy, Bergvall, Gray, Moore, Donley, Devine, like, these are players that can blossom under another similar manager. It's kind of like people are giving up, like they think everyone's going to go away if Ange goes away. Like, no, we have these players and we can seamlessly transition to another manager. Like how Bayern kept their entire squad and just brought in company and they're playing completely different. Barca, Xavi, Flick, we see it. We see these transitions all the time. It's not taking an entire window of overhaul for every new manager, because that's not how it works now. You kind of get what you get, and then you continue to build with your signings each window. But overall, this is the Tottenham project, not the Ange Postecoglou show. And I think if he doesn't get it done in the Europa League this round, or maybe even next round, it's over. And I've kind of accepted it. And I feel like if we kind of have maybe a good ending to the season, not get knocked out of Europa, maybe finish like 10th, 11th, like, people could maybe talk themselves back into Ange, but I kind of feel like it's just delaying the inevitable at this point.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I think the first thing I'll say is I look at Poch, who you brought up, and this is an example of managers who work with what they have. You see in 14 and 15, or maybe it was, 15 and 16, right?
Yeah.
When we almost win the league, Leicester wins it. He's playing Dyer in a pivot with Dembele in a double pivot, right? Worked pretty well. But I think at the end of that season, he recognizes Dyer might not be the midfielder that I think he is, but he's very good at defending and he's very good on the ball. And I have Victor Wanyama now, who is an absolute just vacuum 6 stopper, one of the best I've seen. And I've got Moussa Dembele, and I think it makes sense for me to play a back 3 and get all 3 of them on the field at the same time. Completely revamps his 4-2-3-1, which he'd carried his entire career to that point, and notices he has Walker and Rose, who are very good at getting forward, and Dele and Eriksson, who can both play behind a striker, and Sonny, who can play behind a striker. And you just start to realize that maybe what I have doesn't suit the 4-2-3-1 as well as I thought, but a 3-4-3 might be super efficient in the squad. And we conceded 26 goals that season. That's mind-boggling. 26 goals conceded in a 38-game Premier League season. It's just a plus 60 goal differential. It's just unreal, right? And I look at Ange, and I hate saying this because I do not want to be painted into the box of, oh, this dude is like anti-Scottish football and anti-lower league, lesser leagues than the Premier League and all of that. I really don't want to be painted into that box. I love MLS. I love the South African Premier League. I love the Canadian Premier League, the USL. These are really exciting leagues to watch, right? I have no disrespect to any of them, but I don't think Ange has the experience required to adapt at this level. And at Celtic, there's no adapting required, right?
That's the thing. I feel like people are overlooking that a little bit. Like, oh, it worked everywhere else. Like his last club was Celtic. They have more money than every team. That's like managing Manchester City for the past 8 years.
Exactly. And when you're that good, everyone adapts to you. You don't have to adapt, right? And I just don't think he's able to adapt, man. I think I look at and look, I blame the board more than I blame Ange Postecoglou. I think there's issues all over this club, right? But if we're looking at Ange, I don't think that he has the adaptability to require it. And I'm starting to lose faith in him as a manager. I've been saying it for a long time on the show. If I'm playing Spurs, I'm telling my team, these inverted fullbacks, I need you to funnel the press. Through the press, I need you to funnel the ball to these two inverted fullbacks. And then I need you to win the ball off of them. And every time you do, boom, we're in. How did Bournemouth score? I'm not trying to do my own horn, right? But it's quite simple. It doesn't take some sort of like tactical genius. If I was one, I wouldn't just be doing a podcast, right? But I think it's quite obvious that you funnel the press in a way that gets those two inverted fullbacks the ball. You win it off of them and you're in every single time. And we've been seeing that since actually match 11 under Ange's tenure, when it really hasn't ever been good, after those first 10 matches and all of that. And in that season last year, we secured over half of our points in the first 9 matches of the season, right? So outside of those 9 matches, I don't think I can ever say that it's been like consistently good football under Ange Postecoglou. And people are going to say, oh, injuries. Iraola has had a very similar injury crisis at Bournemouth this season. Now, granted, there's no midweek football. They're not in Europe. I think that factors in. But what he's done, he's been missing on average 9 of his preferred 11, right, all season, and they're competing for Champions League. So I understand injuries happen, and they've happened in a way that are quite unprecedented, but they're not going to stop. The games are coming thick and fast. Their schedule keeps getting more packed. And so if we think that injury crises are not going to happen and this is a one-time thing, I think we're wrong. I think every year is going to pose some sort of injury crisis. And I don't think Ange, again, has the adaptability required to get through an injury crisis. And I think it's been quite evident that, unfortunately, he just maybe doesn't have the chops to do it at this level. We've been woeful for the past 3 months, probably, right?
I'd say 12 months.
Yeah, I agree. I no argument for me.
Like it's been a year. This is how it works now. Like you don't just get 18 months and show zero signs of improvement. With a healthy amount of new players coming in. Like if you think about like just the lineup that we're outlining for the game, Gray, Bergvall, these are players that I know they're young. We need to sign more first team ready players, whatever. They're still 2 of our best players. Gray, Bergvall, Madison, Solanke, Johnson, Van de Ven. Those are Udogi. Those are 7 players that have only played under Ange Postecoglou here.
Mm-hmm.
like that's just the reality of it. And when you compare his squads to the squads that we gave Conte and Mourinho, it's not even remotely close. And maybe that was because we had Harry Kane, and now we're realizing that we actually have to get a real team like to be successful, not just one player.
Yeah.
But that's the reality. And I think that like it's just a straw man argument that I'm hearing, that like, oh, you don't like believe in the manager like because of his managerial background. You just want like a manager from a top 5 league or an English manager or whatever it is. Like what? No, that is not what it is at all. I'd say we are definitely like on the more hipster side of football Twitter. Like we both like look at XG all the time and like X plus A per 90 and watch tactical breakdowns. Like this is not that. This is just the fact that I think Ange is a good manager. I just don't think he's a good manager for Tottenham. I just don't think it's working here. And it's just like you marry someone and then maybe you get divorced. Like that doesn't mean you hate them, but it's just best to part ways at this point and see other people.
100% agree. And like I said, the board and the organization are just as much at fault, because as much as I sit here and say I don't believe Ange is the guy any longer, I think if Ange goes to City, he wins the league multiple years in a row, because he has a very, very efficient style of playing football, and it can be very good. And City's just going to buy him everything required to do that. I know we've spent money on him, but like I will never sit here and say there's somebody he wanted more than Bergvall and more than Archie Gray. Like, of course you want those players for sure, right? You're never going to say no to those profiles, but there's somebody out there who's more ready-made to win you football matches now that you want, right? And Ange is not going to get those because Spurs have played that game and fallen flat on their face. I'm talking Tongi, I'm talking Lo Celso, I'm talking Ryan Sessegnon. We've failed miserably trying to buy that type of player. And so we decide we're going to go back to an asset-based style of incomings, right? And we're going to buy these young players who may be world beaters, probably not, but we'll still get a good chunk of change from them. Now, in Archie Gray and Bergvall, I expect them to be world-class footballers, but the Oda Bears, you'll take a punt for $30 million and see what happens, right? That's what's going to happen at Spurs. And so, yes, I'm not sitting here saying Ange hasn't gotten incomings, and I'm not saying he doesn't want the players he's gotten, but there are players for sure that he would have wanted more than what he got, and that's a Spurs problem, not an Ange Postecoglou problem. That's where the adaptability comes in. I think, like I said, if he's at City where he wants to pound everything through a square hole, City's going to keep feeding him squares to put through that square hole. Spurs are going to give him rectangles and ask him to try to find a way to fit them through, right? So it's just not a good fit. We're going to need somebody who's super flexible tactically, can do different things, someone like, dare I say, Iraola, right? And who knows? I don't think he would leave Bournemouth. I think it'd be pretty silly for him to do that right now. But at the same time, it's easy to forget, first of all, money talks, but that stadium talks for sure, right? You are in London. You're a Big Six club. Yes, Spurs are kind of in the mud right now, but they're still a very attractive destination, regardless of what people in the media want to say, right? So I think there's every reason to go out to think we could go out and get somebody who's more suited to the project than Ange Postecoglou is. Unfortunately, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just think like the overall point is that, for me at least, is that it's frustrating because I think like that this squad of players like with a reasonable, I said this earlier, with a reasonable additions and subtractions, I feel like this core squad of players, maybe add a 6, add a winger, like a really good 6, a really good winger, maybe another creative midfielder, maybe another center back, which I don't think is out of the question. Like we've added like 4 players every window, and then get rid of the players that aren't playing. Like I think that squad's really good. Like I think with another manager, that's like a really, really good team. And I just don't see it with Ange. And I think that's where it's frustrating for me. And that's where I'm just like, it's not going to work here. Because I think this squad has a lot of potential, not just in a couple of years, but right now, like with what we have right now, like we have good players, and that's why it's frustrating. And then the injuries thing, like I read an article today about when we went to the Bernabeu and got a 1-1 draw against Real Madrid. And you know what? The headline of the article was injury depleted Tottenham gets a point against Real Madrid. You go to read the article. This is prime Pochettino. He says they were unlucky to not get all three. And that's with a Harry Winks, an inexperienced Harry Winks in the midfield.
Yep.
That's where Christian Eriksen misses a sitter in that game. And it's just like injuries, they're always going to be present. And it's just not a fucking valid excuse to me. It's not a valid excuse to be bad for an entire 12-month span for me.
Dude, Poch took Spurs to a Champions League final with a lesser squad than what Ange Postecoglou.
Without their best player. Yeah.
Kane was out for the majority of the second half of that season, right? It's easy to forget that. You had
Didn't play against City. Didn't play against City. Son just carried.
Yes, and Poch buried them, right? And our pivot, our double pivot of Sissoko and Winks the entire season, they sold our best ever midfielder, probably outside of Luka Modric. So we'll say second best, third. I'm thinking about Huddle as well, but let's say our third best ever midfielder in Moussa Dembele in the middle of that season, right? I would be fuming. That guy is everything for Pochettino at that point in time, but he was injury prone and Moussa supposedly wanted out and Poch made it work, right? So more can be done. I think if we want to talk about, less about hypotheticals and about the question, well, who do you bring in? Because that's what everybody's going to ask if you say you're ready to move on from Angel. Who are you going to bring in? I'm seeing actually, before I say that, I do think I'm going to ask you the question, who would you bring in? But before I do, I also want to point out, I read an article yesterday through Give Me Sport. Give Me Sport's a reputable outlet for those who don't know. They're very much filtered into Apple News. And Fabrizio Romano, who I'm not a fan of, for the record, does write for Give Me Sport, right? He's just, yeah. If you want to know why I'm not a fan, ask me privately. I'll be happy to share why that is, right? But Give Me Sport is very reputable. They're well-known, big name. They came out with an article yesterday saying that Spurs are ready to cut ties with Johan Lange. They think he's done a poor job. And the Tell situation was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. So it gets me wondering, like, do we actually really like the incomings we brought in? And granted, Bergvall and Archie Gray have been hits. So going to just say that right away, right? But
and I think.
And Solanke, 100%.
And I'll say Danso.
I agree with that too. So sometimes I wonder who was actually the driving force, and you like to think it's Lange, right? But the article basically says that Tell was the straw that broke the camel's back, that Levy felt that it was unacceptable was the word that was used quite frequently throughout the article in quotes, right? Unacceptable that Johan Lange failed in getting Tell, and then Levy and Ange were able to go get it done almost immediately, right? And the idea is, why am I doing your job for you? I think if you're Daniel Levy, which, again, this is a business, this is the corporate world, anytime someone has to go do the job of their inferior because it's not getting done correctly, questions are going to be asked, right? So I don't think I think there's smoke where there's fire, right? And there could be something to Lange being sacked, and maybe that saves Ange's job. Who knows, right? But anyways, back on track here. Talk about who you would bring in. Are there any names that come to mind? I've got one very specific, lofty one that I'll talk about. But who would you bring in if Ange is sacked?
Yeah. Let me pull up my notes app.
Yeah,
you got to making this list in class earlier. Because that's just where we at. Thomas Frank, I think. Adaptability, you want adaptable manager. Thomas Frank is your guy. He literally plays a different style every single game. I don't know how good he would be here, to be honest, but I think it would certainly be worth a shot. Like, I think that would be a really interesting signing. And I think he's a guy that would, like, Brentford, like, he already lives in London. Like, he's already there. Just if nothing else, if some more ambitious, younger, more futuristic managers, let's say, don't work out, then I could see Frank maybe not as like a long-term guy, but a couple years, and maybe like Ryan Mason takes over, whatever it may be. But yeah, I think that would be interesting. Farioli, Ajax manager. He has Ajax absolutely cooking. You want to talk hipsters? This is your guy. He's 35-year-old Italian manager, super attacking football. A bit of inversion with the fullbacks, similar profiles, but again, the downside from a league where maybe it's not so competitive. So, I suggest keep your eyes on some Europa League matches, lads, for Ajax, and see what if you like it. The last manager that Spurs looked at that was big time to come out this league was a man by the name of Arne Slot. Perhaps you've heard of him. So, sometimes it hits, and then sometimes you got your Eric Ten Hags. But I think that's definitely worth a shot for like a more project-oriented manager. He's in his 30s. And then I forgot his first name, Onus from Stuttgart.
Mm-hmm.
He had Stuttgart playing really well last year. I think this year they've slowed down a bit, but another attacking style. Like, I'm just trying to find managers that fit our profile / timeline. He's 32. Like, if you want a guy that is just going all out attack, plays a high line, presses hard, Stuttgart is that team, and they've made it really hard for some teams in the Bundesliga and put together a nice season last year. A bit of a setback this year being in the European places, but I think he's a guy that's competing in a good league right now, especially last year with maybe a subpar team, like little to no backing at all there. So he's interesting. And then Areola, we've talked a lot about him recently. I feel like that's more of a pipe dream. Like, I think he's got his sights set higher than us.
Yeah.
And then the wild card for me is our old friend Ryan Mason. To be honest, like, just give the guy a shot, dude. Like, we got time. Like, Mikey's 18 here. He's turning 18. Bergvall grade 20. Like, what's the harm in just giving good old Ryan a season?
Mm-hmm.
Under the, like, this is a guy. Poch played under him, coached under him. Mourinho coached under him. Conte coached under him. Ange coached under him. You're telling me this guy doesn't know how to adapt and change formations? He studied like 5 different systems.
Yeah.
And he understands what it means here at Tottenham. Like, he truly gets it, gets the fan base, gets the heartache. And he had a career that was sadly cut short. And since then, he's given all his time to the club. And I think rewarding him, although it may upset some people a lot, especially with Daniel Levy, because that would be maybe a little bit too easy. I wouldn't be opposed.
Yeah, I like the Mason side, man. If I'm being completely honest, I think for all the reasons you just listed, Ryan was also very much just a very sound, structured footballer. Just you're kind of run of the mill, super smart, simple midfielder, and I think those guys tend to make really good coaches. Right? They understand how the game works really well.
Pep,
Yeah,
Pep
100%,
Guardiola,
man, 100%.
Xabi Alonso. Like,
Yep,
can go
yep.
on.
And Pep was kind of, I mean, Pep was good, but he was like, wasn't like a standout, he was just a good, and he was on very good teams. Like, don't get me, I can't, I don't want to get my words twisted. Pep was a very talented footballer, but he wasn't like the shining star, and I think sometimes, not so much in Xavi's case, right? But sometimes those guys make really good managers. So, and when you've been studying the game, when you have the horrific injury that he has at 26 years old and football's still your passion and you're not even in your prime yet, the only way that you can scratch that itch is to dive into management, right? And I got to imagine that guy's poured his heart and soul into management over the last, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it's been. And I'd love to see him get an opportunity. The pipe dream name for me is Simone Inzaghi. I know it's very Italian centric of me and probably biased, right? But rumors are that he may be parting ways with Inter at the end of the season.
Why would that be? Do you know? Like,
I don't know for sure. He's in contract. His contract's good until the end of next season, the summer of 26, right? But I think maybe the general idea is Inter is starting to get a little bit stale. There's a chance that they don't win the league this year. I think whether or not they do factors into what happens there. I could see if Inter doesn't win the league, I could see him leaving. If they do win the league, I would expect he probably sees his contract out. But Spurs reportedly have inquired, right, as to whether or not he may be interested in potentially coming to Hotspur way at some point. It would take a big chunk of change. It would be kind of that Mourinho Conte type of hire. So maybe that's the reason why I don't really believe it would actually happen, right? But I would love to get Inzaghi in. He plays a 3-4-1-2. I think when you look at Son and Solanke, you've got a good front two to start building
Tell
around.
and Solanke.
And then you've got Tell. And honestly, I've said it before, I do not think this is like the crux of the system, but I think Brennan Johnson might be pretty effective in a front two.
Oh, yeah. I agree. I totally agree.
So I think you've got a really good contingent when it comes to your front two there. I didn't even think about Tell, right? When it comes, you need a really good 10 in that system, and we've got Kulusevski and Madison. We've got Mikey Moore who can do that well.
Absolutely.
The midfield, you need two engine guys. We've got Popstar, we've got Lucas Bergvall, we've got Archie Gray. I think right there you've got a trio that you can build around. And it just so happens that we're going after Fertizi really hard right now, who plays for Inzaghi at Inter right now, right? And he's that engine number 8. So you kind of play with 2 8s in that system. You've got your wingback sorted for sure. Pedro Porro is a wingback. He's not a fullback. Make no mistake about that, right? You've got Jet Spence.
All of our fullbacks were signed as wingbacks.
Exactly. All of them, right? And so our contingent of wingbacks is solid. And then at the back, you've got Romero with an asterisk. You've got Danzo, and you've got Van de Ven, which I think would be a nasty back three.
That would be gross. And I think Dragusin, like when we have done that a little bit, like perfect, like he's perfect for that center back. Like it's not going to be him building out. Like that's going to be the job of Romero, Van de Ven, Archie Gray if he's playing the 6, and then he can kind of do what he does best, hang back and just fucking defend his ass off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think Inzaghi is somebody who we could build a really good team with for the next 3 or 4 years. You had shared a really good tweet, I believe, in our group chat about how this project doesn't necessarily mean it's one manager, right? It's the project can.
That was Robbie.
It was a Robbie thing. Good shout to Robbie. Miss you, bud. Hope you're well tonight. But shout to you for sharing that tweet because I think it was really, really well said. And if you don't mind, maybe hop in and post that on Twitter. I can do it as well, but I think it'd be good for anyone who follows the pod to take a look at that tweet because I think, again, it's really well said in the idea that a project doesn't have to mean it's one manager throughout that entire project. I think a project can be much broader and more wide than just who the manager is. And so something to think about, right? But that's big picture stuff. We've gotten ahead of ourselves. Let's back up, wrap it up by saying Spurs do play on Thursday. And a lot of this conversation hinges on what happens on Thursday, right? If you go in different directions. Want to definitely highlight our partners before we wrap up the show as well. And we want to get to the Academy and the Loan Watch, right? Brought to you by these wonderful partners of ours. Never forget the Wits End in Finney Ridge, Cascades, and Rainier Growlers in Puyallup, our 3 respective homes. Get down to one of those pubs and watch Spurs on Thursday if you're able. Max, from a Loan and Academy perspective, what do you got for us, if anything?
Yeah, so Academy U18s over the weekend, 6-4 win over the Shites. Luca Williams-Barnett got on the score sheet twice. Janai Byfield, 1 to watch. Center back prospect, absolutely insane. He got on the score sheet. Tynan Thompson, who's been a standout for them as well, got on the score sheet. Then Loan Watch, we had 2 players play today, Yang Min Hyuk and Will Lankshire. They are not having the greatest start to their respective loans, so hopefully they can pick that up in the home stretch of the season. But yeah, Yang and Will have had a tough go as of late. I'd throw Alfie Dorrington in that bucket. None of those 3 have really stood out at their respective clubs. So hopefully they can turn it around, but then there's always the possibility for another loan next year for those guys. And then I think in the case of maybe Alfie Dorrington with Vuskovic coming in and then Phillips, who's having a great loan again for Stoke, where he might be someone we cash in on in the summer, unfortunately. But yeah, so that's Academy and Loan Watch for you guys.
Appreciate it, man. And yeah, the Vuskovic and Ashley Phillips shouts start to make me think about one Simone Inzaghi a little bit more, not the conversation. But yeah, appreciate that. Like we said, make sure you get down to one of those pubs, the respective pub. You know, I was going to say based on your geographical location around the Sound, but if you feel like making a trip, you know, you're always welcome to cross the border and head down south or north, depending on where you are, right? And see the other side of your Seattle Spurs family. But whether or not you're able to, we understand. Get down there if you can. Tip your bartender super well, always very important. Make sure you follow us. You can find me at Scott G. Bird. You can find Max at Going Limbs. Make sure you follow the pod. We are at and Lilywhite on all social media platforms. Make sure you follow Seattle Spurs. That is the most important thing to take away from this. We are at Seattle Spurs on all social media platforms. And be sure to sign up for the Gmail hot list or the mailing list, right? It is seattlespurs@gmail.com. Shoot us an email. Let us know you're interested in being on the list. And if we put on it, you're going to get all kinds of information about Spurs, Seattle Spurs, watch parties, holiday parties, you name it, right? It's going to come to your inbox. You're not going to have to worry about much. So please sign up. For myself, for Max, for the whole crew, we appreciate everybody who's listened to the show. And as always, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs. Like this video and like our tweet to be eligible for Seattle Spurs scarf, courtesy of me, if Troy Parrott scores. So somehow this has happened 3 times this season. I was not anticipating that when I made this offer, but here we go. Round 3. So shout out to Troy Parrott, Spurs legend.
No doubt. Yeah, definitely like and subscribe. You want to win yourself a free scarf, especially if Troy Parrott knocks Spurs out of the Europa League. You will at least have a chance of winning a free scarf, which is a nice consolation.
There you go.
Guys. So make sure you like and subscribe. For myself, for Max, like we said, we appreciate everybody. And again, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.